Hey everybody. We were just doing some testing in Austin, and I wanted to talk about a couple of the athletes that we worked with, some of the metrics that we found that I think are very important for everybody to understand through your training, depending on what you're training for, of course, and what your coach specifically has programmed for you. Our testing can fill in the blanks of the program, and we can work backwards and say, here's what your goal is, to finish this Ironman or, marathon race, and here's how we can work backwards. Here's what metrics need to adjust for you to hit that goal. So that's really cool aspect of our performance projector. But anyway, the metrics that I want to talk about, some of the stuff I want to talk about is we had a couple athletes that, one of which specifically lost, a significant amount of weight, which was awesome. And he wanted to pick up running, started to pick up running, now wants to do triathlon. So, and previously he's been doing a lot of endurance running to build that base, which is awesome. It's excellent. And so when we were doing this testing, I'm realizing that what he had set for his long runs, yes, we're accurate for those long runs. Great job building that base. But then for his tempo and endurance runs, he actually wasn't pushing it hard enough. Now, what's interesting is the perception of fatigue aerobically really wasn't aerobic fatigue. So he was perceiving his lungs as not being able to push further, but what's really happening is his muscle strength and endurance was lacking. So that greater turnover rate and just that lower body strength to push him further. So adding in the appropriate intervals and tempo runs is really going to help him, but we wouldn't have noticed that necessarily. He could perceive and feel, but what was interesting is even his perception of an all-out effort, we ended up having to do another phase because he could push even further. So it's really pushing the limits mentally and physically to see where you can go, okay? So we battle ourselves daily with multiple things, especially in training, thinking that I can't go any faster, I can't push any harder. Well, you can, a lot of times, and that's what we were able to find for him is, his endurance is great, aerobically he's sound, recovery was awesome for him after each phase that we did. So, he's built a great foundation. And now we need to prime that house that we're putting on top of that foundation. So that was awesome. A lot of athletes will perceive that they just need to add volume and a lot of mileage. And I'm not saying necessarily go out and do 100-meter sprints for, speed work, but you do need to push those limits. You need to push that lactic acid and then recover from it. Okay, lactic acid isn't a bad thing. We just need to get proficient and efficient at utilizing it as energy and fuel. Okay, so another athlete is very, very proficient on strength and recovery. And this was fascinating to me personally because typically a lot of athletes that, we work with don't really put recovery at the top of their list. Okay, so it's training and then go to work, do your daily activity, just go on with your day, right? And you're not recovering appropriately. When we were doing this test yesterday, what we found is he was able to push these limits and push these phases to an amazing level, but his recovery was almost instantaneous. And that by itself is amazing because what's happening is, training for a longer race, like a 100-mile or ultra race, you're going to build a bigger base aerobically, and you're not going to really push any thresholds, right? You don't necessarily need that right off the bat. So his base has just been massive aerobically, which is awesome. And so when we pushed some of the paces that he used to do when he was training for a marathon, his body somewhat remembered it, but it was very foreign to his muscles. So he was realizing that fatigue of his legs as opposed to his lungs and his aerobic system. So again, what we're seeing is, that strength injury prevention piece comes into play and is very important and very much overlooked, but also the recovery, right? So fatigue recovery comes into play because if you're going to produce that lactic acid, right, and really push at the beginning of a race or going up a hill, if you're going to push that limit, and if you're not recovering the right way, well, now you just have lactic acid sitting in the legs, sitting in the muscles and the blood, and it's going to hurt that next effort. right? So you have to learn, and we need to learn how to produce that lactic acid, pull back, and recover from it. So just a tidbit based on, a couple things we saw. I'll explain more in detail in another video, but hope you enjoyed.